Hello everyone. In the collection of Freud writings called the Penguin Freud Reader, which I've already referred to several times in this channel, it's a collection that I've enjoyed so far. It is collected and edited by Adam Phillips. Now, in this video, I'm going to talk about the third item in that collection, chapter 3, which is a short letter written by Sigmund Freud to the French writer Romain Rolland. Now, Romain Rolland himself might be relatively unknown in the Anglo-American book reading community, but personally to me, Romain Rolland was an important person. In my late teens and early 20s, I read several of his works, including a biography that he wrote, a biography of Beethoven, the composer, and he had this novel in multiple volumes called Jean-Christophe. Jean-Christophe is partly inspired by the life and work of Beethoven, and it is also inspired heavily by Nietzsche's philosophy. He also had this other novel, also in multiple volumes, called The Enchanted Soul, or La Méchante. So he was very important to me, and I was very pleasantly surprised to find that he was a correspondent of Sigmund Freud. So this letter is written in the year 1936, the year that Sigmund Freud is 80 years old, and it is written in celebration of Rolland's 70th birthday. So both authors are relatively old, and they are corresponding, and Freud actually in the beginning of the letter says that don't expect to be very impressed by this letter because my best years are behind me, so I'm not going to be able to offer a lot of deep insights in this letter because all of my best work is already done. I'm an old man. So that's the preface of the letter. And then Freud goes on to talk about one single instance, one single memory that keeps coming to him. And that memory is from Freud's own life when he was in his mid or late 40s. I think he was around 48 years old. He was traveling with his brother, and he was traveling in Europe, I believe, in Italy, and then later in Greece. And they meet with his brother. They meet one of his brother's colleagues. And this colleague tells them that you should really go and see Athens this time. You should change your traveling plans. He disapproved of their traveling plans. The places that you're planning to go are pretty warm at this time of year. Don't go there. Instead, go to Athens, and you spend 3 days there. You'll see all the good scenic parts of the city, and you'll really enjoy yourself. So Sigmund and his brother, their first response to this advice is to fall into a depressive mood. So they both get really down somehow, very strangely. They get sad. So they spend half a day in sadness until they go to a ticket office, and they just, without talking to each other, without really deciding together, without conversing about it, they both go and together in coordination, they buy tickets to Athens. So that's the first surprising part of the story. They just go after that depressive mood, because if they really wanted to buy the tickets, there was no reason to be depressed about it. There was no reason to be down. And if they are down, then it means that they are not buying the tickets. So there's a contradiction between how they were feeling and what they did. The next scene that is important that Freud talks about is the scene of him encountering the Acropolis. Acropolis is a major place in Athens, historically very important. And Freud says that I was facing this Acropolis, and the thought that came to my mind was a two-sided thought, as if my mind was divided into two parts, and one of these parts was saying, "Oh yeah, here it is. I finally see this Acropolis." But there was another voice in his mind that was saying, "Oh, I didn't believe that this existed. I guess I was wrong, and the Acropolis is in reality, it does actually exist." So the rest of the letter, Freud continues to talk to Romain Rolland, to talk about what this reaction means. This reaction of disbelief, or at least in part disbelief. And he talks about the emotional dimension of this thought, which is very important. It is important when we have a strange thought coming to our mind. It is important to ask about the feeling that is associated with it. And the feeling that was associated with Freud's encounter with the Acropolis was, this is too good to be true. or this was something that I never thought I would see. In fact, it was so unexpected that the very existence of Acropolis itself was under question for me. And even now that I'm seeing it, I have a strange feeling about it, and I'm still not very sure whether it in fact exists. And so Freud analyzes these twofold responses and talks about a few things. The one that I want to focus on is the strangeness or the unexpected nature of this encounter. So what does it mean when something is unexpected to us? What does it mean when we say, oh, this is so good, I never thought it would actually happen in reality? That means that deep down, we believe ourselves to not deserve it to happen. So it's a kind of judgment about ourselves, it's a kind of judgment about our lives that is controlling our beliefs and our emotions. It is kind of like a rule. It is a rule that our mind has accepted, and it is deeply ingrained in our mind. The rule about that you are not allowed to see this beautiful scenery, or you're not allowed to visit this beautiful place, this important place, or you're not allowed to have this great relationship. And Freud says that we have come up with these rules as a coping mechanism. We have come up with these rules because that was, at some point in our childhood, it was the only way to make sense of our situation. For example, imagine that little Sigmund Freud, as a child growing up in a household, and his father has two characteristics that are not very pleasant to him. The first is that he's poor. The father is poor. He doesn't have the means of traveling. He doesn't have the means of taking them to a historical site. Secondly, the father is also culturally poor. He doesn't have the ability to appreciate a culturally significant place, a culturally significant site. At the same time, keep in mind that a child needs to have a very positive attitude towards his father. This is at least according to Freud's framework. The child, in order to cope emotionally and psychologically cope with the life within a family, child has to find within himself the ability to admire his father at any cost. And in order to be able to admire his father, he has to deny certain parts of his reality. So, for example, when he learns at school that there are these historical moments, these historical sites that he can still go and visit, to reconcile what he's learning at school to his family life, he has to in some way repress and deny and push aside from his mind, to push aside those things that he's learning in order to preserve the father's status. And this becomes so ingrained, so long-lasting, that later on in his mid to late 40s, he is still under the influence of those coping strategies. That he still, in some ways, feels estranged. He still feels like the city of Athens and Acropolis are strange places that are not fully real places. That is an attitude that he has formed in dealing with the psychological life within his family. So I would encourage you to take a look at this letter. It's short, it's very well written, it has multiple references to interesting historical moments, and so far I've also found all the other items in this collection to be very worth our attention. And that's all for today. Thank you very much for your attention, and I will speak with you soon.